Welcome to the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com.
And I'm Jill Nowacki, founder and CEO of Humanidei. Thanks for joining us today as we continue to explore what it really means to lead with authenticity and heart.
This episode is brought to you by the Sheeter Group, a leading executive benefits firm that meets your retention and succession needs, from non-qualified benefit plans to compensation studies and performance design. They're helping credit unions invest in leadership that lasts. Learn more at sheetergroup.com.
Today, we're diving into one of my favorite leadership traits and an absolute must for inclusive leadership: curiosity. And to talk about this favorite trait, we're joined by one of our favorite people, Caroline Willard, the president and CEO of the Cornerstone League.
Welcome back to the show, my friend.
It's so much fun to be here with you too.
And now you get to have a conversation with Jilly too. So you just don't get me firing questions at you. So curiosity isn't about just asking questions. It's about staying open, exploring possibilities, and challenging assumptions. The leaders who cultivate curiosity keep themselves and their teams adaptable and innovative.
Curiosity is a superpower. It pushes us out of familiar thinking and opens up worlds of possibility to us. Today with Caroline, we're unpacking why curiosity matters, what can sometimes get in the way, and how leaders can make it a deliberate practice. So let's get started with that. Why is curiosity essential for leaders today?
I guess I'm just going to jump on in.
This is how we do it.
You're the star. So
I don't know about that. I mean, I think it kind of goes hand in hand with vulnerability and just not hardening yourself to what's possible. And I think that makes a leader more approachable. If it doesn't seem like we already have all the answers, but that we're not just open to, but welcoming new ideas and embracing what we don't know.
Jill, I think over the 220 some odd episodes of this podcast and all the leaders that have been on, curiosity seems to be one of those constants where they're constantly learning. We know so many other people like Caroline from meeting at conferences or things of that nature. Or you think of all the books that have been recommended on the show, that idea that even the questions that come from it, I think curiosity is one of those traits that just lives in the best leaders out there.
That's so surprising, though, because, I mean, of course, it's delightful to have a conversation with somebody who already knows every answer about everything that ever existed, right?
It's exhausting, Jill. I would not label it any other way, but I think that, Randy, I think that's one of the reasons we see that a lot of the more successful leaders out there are voracious readers. We know that lifelong learning is a pretty constant trait amongst better leaders, maybe not all leaders, but better leaders. And so, yeah, staying open to, I like to read across a spectrum. So I stay open to a variety of genres. Right now, I'm listening on audio on Audible because it's fun to listen to a rock star on Audible. I'm listening to Bruce Springsteen's biography, and it's fantastic. I'm a terrible musician. I do play piano, but not well. And so it just kind of, I'm curious about his songwriting process and where does that come from? And it's him sitting on the edge of a bed in a hotel room after the set at 3:00 in the morning. And so I love learning about other people's creative process. And that, believe it or not, helps me as a CEO to understand that there's more than one way. You don't just flip chart your way to success.
What a great example, too, Caroline, of that curiosity that extends beyond, sure, like, let's be curious about great business leaders. Let's figure out what other leaders who have walked in similar types of roles as us have done to be successful, but to stay open to that idea of people who have had different successful journeys. And how is it different to find success as a rock star compared to a financial services executive? And even the day we're recording this, so Jane Goodall died yesterday, right? And like Randy sent me a link on that, and just being so curious about, it's not a lifestyle that's anywhere close to mine, but like what motivated her to go down that passionate path that she explored and to look into something like so different in a different way? And what lessons can we apply? Speaking of curiosity, like her curiosity about the work she did and what that taught us as a world is remarkable too. So sorry, a bit of a tangent there.
There was a really interesting part in that article that I sent though about that I guess I didn't realize is like at some point she kind of, I don't want to say she walked away from the chimps, but she had other people that could do it because she realized that she could use her notoriety for the climate, for the planet, for the bigger picture type of a thing. And that's what she did for decades afterwards, which I was like, what a fascinating thing to walk away from something that she loved to do something even bigger. So it was, but obviously she wasn't just in Tanzania with chimps. That was it. There was much more to it, but yeah.
I felt personally touched by that news story, which sounds crazy. You know, sometimes when a famous person dies, you feel a little bit of personal loss. Because I think you all know I was in Uganda in April and I went to the Ngamba Chimpanzee Preserve, which she helped found.
Oh, yeah.
And
awesome.
It was incredible because there you get to see these chimps in their natural habitat. And they were so looking forward to Jane Goodall visiting in September of this year. So I just immediately wondered, gosh, did she get to make that trip? Yeah, I'm fascinated by her. Anyone who has just gone headlong into a field of study, especially a woman doing work like that, was pretty exotic at the time.
That said in the article that she had to have a chaperone her first time because that was like she went that because you couldn't just send a woman there.
Same with Diane Fossey. She had the same sort of issue with the gorillas.
A question on this, there's so many things that I'm sure we'll talk about, but I think of as we bring it back to credit unions, as we bring it back to the organizations that we lead, I'm sure over the past couple of years, all three of us have spent time dabbling in AI and figuring out what that might mean for our organizations, probably more than even dabbling. But if we didn't have that same curiosity, and I think that's one of the things, and we've all been around, say, a leader who maybe is 1 foot out the door or whatever you may want to say, where their curiosity seems to maybe go down, and innovation also tends to go down in those organizations as well, unless there's a great team around them. So I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about that, because to me, curiosity does lead to innovation. It leads to us being adaptable organizations. And we talk about so often how fast everything is changing and moving. So either one of you want to jump on that one?
Sure. Yeah, I'm personally fascinated by AI because, I mean, we've seen early successes with it in the lending application. Obviously, full disclosure, we partner with Zest AI, and I love what they're doing to expand the horizon of the pool, or to deepen the pool of potential borrowers, because thin file borrowers, suddenly you can get a more robust picture of what their ability to repay is, because of factors that FICO doesn't even look at. And so we've been really encouraged by that. But I've heard a lot of pundits say that virtually every job is going to be touched by AI. And I write a lot of speeches. You would think that I wrote every one of those from scratch, but a lot of times I need a little, leg up. And so it's nice to have a tool that makes all of us more productive. And the curiosity tie-in there, I think, is let's get creative. Let's not approach it from a standpoint of, how do we prevent the risk that this might introduce into our institution? Let's do blue sky first and think about, all right, what are all the different, as one of my members says, no joy processes that exist in the credit union? How can AI solve those problems, right? Take those no joy tasks away from the workforce. That's a fun thought.
I love that.
I love that concept too, in just like whether it's with AI or anything else, but that idea of blue sky thinking. I was just meeting right before this call with two of my team members, and we were talking about like marketing, and our new marketing assistant has been tasked with updating a lot of things we do. And we were talking about some of these tools where she updated something, and I said, well, do you think that's the right tool to use anyway, considering it's it's a trifold brochure, printed trifold brochure that we have. And I was like, you did make the trifold brochure look nice, but do we even want a trifold brochure right now? And if not, what would be the thing that is better than a trifold brochure. How do we ask that question and ask that question of somebody who's 22 and different rather than by doing what we've always done?
Yeah. I don't know if you two, I'll bet you do know exactly who Gary Vaynerchuk is because he's just a brilliant dude. And I heard him speak a bunch of years ago and he said, the day the automobile was invented, the guy who had herds and herds of horses lost because they're no longer the only means for transportation. And so if we're not looking ahead, if we're not thinking about how we can get out-engineered of our own business, then shame on us because we could end up with a few hundred heads of horses that we don't need. Nothing against horses, of course.
I love that. As we talk about it on teams too, one of the things that I've realized at CUInsight is I want curious people on the team. I want people that ask questions. I like to surround myself with people that have that curiosity. As far as in Jill, obviously you can speak to this. You interview a whole bunch of people and bring a lot of people on board. Is curiosity something that as leaders that you're looking at, as you're bringing people on as well?
We might not say, we really are looking for the trait of curiosity. But what we do say is we want someone who's going to come in and listen first. So when leaders in CEO interviews and they're doing their strategic presentation on the front end where they're talking about how they're going to approach the first year, those leaders who come in with all the answers are usually less well received than those leaders who come in and say, well, in my first 90 days, I'm going to actually go talk to our key stakeholders. I'm going to connect with the team. And so I think there's a really key connection or link between listening deeply and being curious. And everyone might know that the textbook answer is, well, I'm going to come in and listen first. If that desire to listen is fueled by a true, genuine curiosity for why do we do things the way we do? What really are the needs that we have to solve here before that? Well, I have a solution, so we'll overlay it. Whether that's really the problem we're here to solve or not is challenging. So I'm not sure that people say necessarily in the job posting, we're looking for a curious leader. But I think deep listening is a key trait that can't be achieved without a genuine curiosity.
Yeah, totally agree. You said it better than I would have said it. But what was in my head as you were saying that is curiosity isn't always forward looking. Sometimes you're looking at the history of an organization and why it evolved to where it is now. And then once you understand that, because there could be good reasons why we do something dumb. It ostensibly may look really dumb, but there may be something that we need to understand before we go about re-engineering it, because you can destroy the core of what's good of an organization if you just come in with a chainsaw.
It reminds me of a story I heard. I had a sort of a temp job right out of college, and I was working with some conference planning with city planners, and they had a session at one of the conferences where somebody who had served in the Peace Corps came and was talking, and they were telling a story about how they...
Was it George Hofheimer?
No. Maybe. I guess I wouldn't notice it. The first time I met George, and I didn't notice. But the Peace Corps volunteers went in and thought, wow, these people don't even realize what great fertile soil they have to plant all these crops. And so we're going to teach them a little bit about farming, and we're going to show them. And so they planted all these crops, and the soil was great because it was rich and it was wet and it was close to the water. And so the plants were growing and everything was great. And as they got closer to time to harvest, the hippos came in and ate everything. And it was the people who lived there knew that's where the hippos would come and that the hippos would be excited about the watermelons and that delicious food that the people had planted for them. But the people coming in and saying, this is the perfect soil to plant crops, not asking the questions about hey, why don't we do it that way already? Because somebody to have asked those right questions, they would have gotten the answers. But I think we do that, certainly not the three of us, but sometimes people might walk into an organization and think, well, gosh, I did this thing at my last credit union and it worked so well. So let's apply that same lesson here. And because people aren't likely to challenge that new leader who walks in, you might see leaders who aren't willing to ask those questions about, like, just as you said, Caroline, the past, how did we get to this place? Doing things that if they just asked the right questions along the way, they maybe would save some time and heartache on too.
Well, and sometimes you tumble into a new leadership position. Just last night, I made the mistake of going to my homeowners association annual meeting.
Are you on the board?
No, you're on the board,
you know how this ends, don't you? Yeah. Yeah. So they announce a giant dues increase. And I run an association. It's not a homeowners association, but I do run an association. And I understand about governing documents and about governors on the rate increases that you're allowed to do every year. And, so I asked half a dozen questions. And of course, yes, now I'm on the board.
No, you're on the board because no one wants to be on that board. So they're like, you're on it.
It's such a great leadership trait. It got you a new leadership role.
I think it did not serve me well in this regard, but I digress. This is more about
that's the amount of times I've been like, no, Jill, you don't need to be on the HOA board. That does not fit your schedule. When they open the pool really doesn't matter to us that much.
So we're having a bit of a love fest over curiosity. And certainly we've all said, this is a great trait. It can help us be more innovative, be more creative, not make missteps. But, if we can all agree that curiosity is a great trait to have, what sometimes gets in the way of leaders staying curious then? Like, if it's such a good trait, why don't we all just do it naturally, consistently, always?
Yeah. Well, I think doing things by rote is actually a little easier. I mean, it's easier to till the field after crops have been in place for a few years. The tractor moves better. And I think the same thing is true. It's like you get comfortable. And I think leaders sometimes fall into the trap of wanting to have all those answers, or they just get tired of having to adjudicate everything, right? It's like, come on, does everything have to be a debate and ideation and thought bubbles exercises you do on whiteboards and such? That gets exhausting. So I think that's probably why some people don't do it. It takes vulnerability. Some people aren't comfortable there.
I was thinking very similar. And there's also that I think sometimes, and maybe after we've all tried things before that didn't work the way that we expected. So you really want your next one to be a win. So is it even the fear of failure that suddenly like creeps in where you're like, crap, that didn't work out well last time. I got to go back to the board with something new or back to the team and say, I know that last one wasn't the best idea, but I think that could be in there with people too. And my guess is with teams as well, where it's just like, let's just keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah. But Randy, that is a rich vein to tap because failures, mistakes teach us so much more than our successes ever do. And it's like teams, I think, can coalesce if they say, you know what, we know why that went wrong. We skipped this step or we rushed that step or whatever. And so that's the challenge, is to stay resilient in the face of maybe some setbacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a certain muscle memory that comes with doing things the way we've always done them too. And it's like, I can move faster this way. And so the idea of like actually stopping and evaluating and saying, okay, we can move fast when we do it this way, but is it the most correct way to do it? Or if we get the task done more quickly here than if we pause and stop and evaluate and shift things. And are we able to look into the longer term, or are we just so busy that like we're just going to keep churning the way we've always done instead of like stopping to really say, is there a better way? Is there a different way? I think about something I heard recently, and I don't have data to back it up. There may be a lot of leaders listening right now who are going to be like, oh, that's true in our organization. But I've heard that one of the biggest wastes that financial institutions have is that they pay for new core systems. They pay for new technology, and then they do not leverage a majority of what that technology offers because it would involve asking people to reevaluate how they do things and look for better ways. And so people end up squandering a lot of resources and not realizing the efficiencies that they're attempting to invest in because it's too much work to have the people be curious about reevaluating the processes. And that's when you hear that, it's like, oh, that makes me a little queasy to imagine like we have this desire for efficiency, but we don't have enough time to question the process that would help us move toward the actual efficiencies. And that's a bit ironic.
Yeah, well, I agree with what you're saying. One of my, I guess it's calling it a mantra would be too strong, but it is something I believe in. And that is that you oftentimes need to pause and figure out what the root cause is for whatever. If it's something, we're not moving quickly enough. We're not getting enough sales. This product isn't selling. This team isn't functioning as well. Well, what's the root cause behind that? That does take time. That does take effort. But then you get this accelerant after you've figured out what that root cause is, maybe addressed it. And Jill, I know it will be close to your heart to talk about hiring. The other thing that we do at Cornerstone is we have a really strict rule that we do not backfill positions until we've had a quick huddle amongst the executive team about what are the needs of the whole organization. And we've got this FTE open right now. Well, do we just redeploy? Do we hire a backfill for that person? Or do we redesign the job because our organization has changed or our strategy has changed? So we have to be looking to our forward version of ourselves, the 5 years hence version of ourselves when we're hiring.
Going back to the AI comment too, if people are not looking really proactively at their job descriptions right now in a strategic way when they are looking to backfill positions, then they're probably not writing responsibilities into those job descriptions about how to effectively upskill on and leverage AI. And so people are nervous, right? We're all worried that the computers are going to take our jobs. So are we proactively thinking about how to ensure that we actually have jobs that use the computers instead of the jobs that we used to have back in 2005 that we're still trying to deploy the same way? I often one of the roles that I always, when I became the CEO at the Credit Union League of Connecticut, the executive assistant I had started in that role in 1979, and I took the job in 2013. And it was like, how much did her job change? Like, what was it like to be an executive assistant in 1979 compared to in 2013? When you think about just even the act of registering me for a conference, I don't think she was getting on Delta.com to buy me a plane ticket in 1979. And so, like those kinds of areas, though, and if that person had not stayed curious about like emerging technology and new things, she wouldn't have been particularly helpful to me in that role. And I think, that's an extreme example, but we should be looking the same way because, what we needed in 2019 is different than what we need today in that area, in any area too.
That's what I was thinking, because even when you brought up the core system or whatever system we're doing, I don't believe any of it should be okay, well, we've got that taken care of. We don't have to think about it for the next 5 years or 10 years, right? Because you can be halfway into a project and realize that there's another tool or another way to do something. You're still going to that end strategic goal, but all of a sudden there's something that didn't exist 12 months ago that will now do it better. Or you needed 4 things 12 months ago, but now one tool does all 4 of them for you better than the 4 of them individually, right? That to me is, boy, we all have to be curious.
Yeah, we got advice recently through some consulting that we've brought in about our own engagement model at Cornerstone. And the interesting thing is that people now expect, not only do they not really want a quarterly magazine, because you can imagine the content might get a little stale on a quarterly basis since the news cycle is so short now. But not only do they not want that, what they want is their news completely personalized down based on what they've clicked on, based on where they've been on your website, what events they've gone to, even which advocacy positions they've supported, things that are important to them. Well, they want to know more about those things. If they helped us write letters during Don't Tax My Credit Union, then they're likely to want more information about how we're preventing credit unions from losing their tax exemption. They cared about it once, they'll continue to care about it for some time until they care about something else.
I'm trying not to say this is dangerous, but it is in my mind. But this is where I think curiosity comes into play so much more is like, if we only get fed what we've been fed before, like to me, it stops growth. And I think we've seen that as a country and as a world probably is like, we have the ability or the algorithms can just feed us certain things. So there's still, I understand, and we know that human nature, we like to read more of and kind of be presented more of what we enjoy and less of what we don't. When we were going to have this conversation, and even Caroline, when you talked about going to Uganda early in the call, all three of us have traveled extensively. We've traveled together to wonderful things. We've all worked with our friends, George and everybody over at Acosta and Grace and everyone over there. One of the things when people ask me why I enjoy travel so much is because I like not knowing. So there's something about that. I'm sure we've all been in positions before. I thought, Caroline, you told a good story about it, but like, I remember the first time going to Africa and somebody asking me a question and me being like, oh, I have the answer to that. And then pulling back and being like, but do I in this situation? If I don't know the situation. So when I travel, to me, there's a sense of, I'm so curious about everything else going around, and I try as hard as possible not to make assumptions that I know the answer. That I think after living in the United States for 51 years, being in this career for a long time, I often have a sense of certainty in my answers. As soon as I get outside the US, I no longer have that. Even if I think I know the answer, there's been plenty of times that I may know part of the answer, but I don't know the whole answer. There's always that deeper. And that's something like that, kind of getting outside of my day to day and my comfort zone is, to me, it's the easiest place to be curious. So it is a question of bringing that back to the team meeting or the strategic planning too, to still have that same curiosity that I might have in Uganda if I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, or West Hartford. Or
So Randy, the response to what Caroline said, and I'm curious if you were starting to go down this path or if it just triggered this thought with me. But Caroline's talking about getting advice that is largely what we see in the broader world, not just as like associations, how we talk to our members, but like the reality of the human condition right now is that we do expect highly customized, highly personalized. If somebody sends me, a membership card to AARP, I'm like, what a mistake. I'm not there yet in that side of it, but like, I'm not, Randy. And so, or you get something that's a pitch, like we get a pitch for solar panels. Okay. We live in a condo association where we're not allowed to like make that type of decision for our stuff. So it feels like it's just
until you're on the board, like
people.
Yeah. Maybe I could get that done for you, Jill.
But people expect this certain level of, you should know me enough to pitch me something that I want to hear. And so it makes sense to me that that's the advice that the consultant has given Caroline. And I'm curious, Randy, if that kind of, this might feel dangerous. Did that come from this like question of, are we so strongly wanting people to just give us what we want that it's diminished our curiosity, like as a species? Like, are algorithms decreasing our desire to be more curious? And what you're talking about is this, yes, of course we like to hear the things that we already know. That's confirmation bias in play. I'm looking for somebody to agree with me. So do you think that the algorithms we face, the customization we have, do you think that's hurt people's curiosity?
We kind of do information for a living. And one of the things is like balancing that personal experience that everybody expects right now, but still making sure that you're filtering in other information that's still important as well. So Caroline mentioned, don't tax my credit union. So, okay, if it's only about that, it doesn't mean that other priorities aren't important for us as a whole. And that to me is, so it's like, okay, well, they don't like seeing other advocacy stuff, just that. Well, then they're missing out. Like they're being singular. I'm not saying people are that singular, but I would even go back to, so I only want to see stuff about this core system because that's my core. Well, it might not be forever. Do you know what's available elsewhere? So I think that's such an interesting thing. But to your point, Jill, I go back to, it's probably from conferences or whatever, the Target analogy. It's like where they almost know people are pregnant before the other spouse might. And like how they advertise, I think it's the same thing with our credit unions. We're at different stages of life today than we were when we were 25 or 35. So being marketed to one thing, it's just irrelevant. So I think there is that know your member, just like in anything we do. If Amazon sent me suggestions that were like, you might also like diapers, I'd be like, that's weird and no. I mean, I wouldn't.
Where I think we're going though, but before the conversation turns, I wanted to kind of refine what I was going for earlier, because I think the trick of AI will be to look for relevant adjacencies.
Yeah.
So if someone was engaged in the don't tax my credit union fight, okay, so now that we've mostly put that in the rearview mirror, bankers are still coming at us. They still want a hearing on whether our tax exemption's fair, blah, blah, blah. They've been asking for that for 100 years. So I'm kind of tired of that. But the relevant next question is, all right, so if we did not get taxed, are we now emboldened to ask for other powers? Because we have built up some resilience. We've sharpened our tools in our toolbox. And I think it is a great time for us to be asking for, well, what else could credit unions do? Because we've just had a win. And so I think if we use a combination of human and artificial intelligence to understand where we can take the conversation next, then we can truly keep people engaged.
I think that is such a key. I think it requires a little bit of discipline. So this idea of like, okay, you just got through fighting the don't tax my credit union battle. And like, how easy is it to be like, whew, we're done. Like, call it good, right? Instead of, okay, let's be curious about what's next. And then that power that comes from, leveraging AI, using human knowledge to continue to persist and to be disciplined enough to stay curious about what else is possible. Because Caroline, the don't tax my credit union fight, we have some muscle memory on that one in the industry. But how powerful and what a good reminder to stay curious about what else is possible instead of just being like, okay, well, we're done for now, but we know it's going to bubble up again. So let's just build up our reserves so we're ready to fight that same battle again and really be curious about what other battles should we be fighting.
Yeah, I actually kind of bristle when I hear somebody say, oh, we dodged that bullet. It's like, well, there are more bullets in the gun. And we're going to need to be able to be really good at defense, but why aren't we buying our own ammunition at the same time?
Yeah, play some offense, right?
That's what's important is we've got to consider this. I always say advocacy is like laundry. It's never done. You just got to keep at it. Did that make you sad, Jill?
Yeah, I just was like, I have so much laundry to do right now. Like, you know this, like when you travel a lot and you're home for like 2 days, you're like home long enough to throw the dirty clothes into the hamper and grab some new ones, but not enough to actually like clean the clothes. And so I have chores to do.
My dry cleaner is going to file a missing persons report on me. I'm any day now.
Any day. Too bad. Oh, I just picked ours up. It was scary. So much. Okay, as we're getting towards the end, how has curiosity shaped your own leadership experience?
Well, I love it when I get this compliment because it means more than most. And that is that people see me as an authentic leader because I don't try to pretend like I have the answers. I think I got hired because I have a certain skill set, but I think the better skill set is to constantly be permeable, to allow osmosis to happen, to soak in new ideas and understand the synthesis that needs to happen, to take those new ideas, new concepts, AI being a great example. All right, well, how does that change our business? How does that change what's possible? And so I love it when I get that compliment because that means I'm letting my guard down and letting good ideas in, either from humans or just from our environment.
I would just add to that too. I think that being curious allows those new ideas in, and it creates just such a different approach to problem solving. When you're able to to truly be curious about, like, why are we in this position in the first place? And maybe not just ask the first question, but ask the first question and then the second and then the third until you really do get to the heart of that. I'm going to get about 6 parts of this wrong. I'm going to need a fact checker after I say what I'm going to say here, but not intentionally. I think Einstein said something to the effect of, like, if he has 30 minutes to save the world, he'll spend 20 minutes on it defining the problem and 10 actually developing the solution for it. Let's go with 90%, 10%. I don't remember what the real thing is, but it's that idea of how important it is to really define the problem. And I think so often we get that wrong, where we're like, you bring a team together and say, okay, we need a solution, and everybody just jumps into those solutions. And like a truly curious person is probably going to start at the problem, and that time spent defining the problem, then it's really easy to come up with a solution because you really understand what's at the heart of it. And even Caroline, when you were talking about Zest AI earlier and that concept of, so they do some great work with thin file, like no credit borrowers. At some point, it wasn't, how do we use AI to do this? The question was, how do we get affordable credit in the hands of people who we are not qualifying through our traditional systems? And somebody went back with that question to realize there are people out there who can be great borrowers who, for whatever reason, don't have a credit score already. And they didn't just say, what can we do to hand out more loans? Those questions had to go back to really like, what's at the root of those people not being able to borrow in the first place? And that's where those solutions come forward. And so I think that, sorry, Randy, long answer to that question, but like curiosity has shaped my leadership experience. I don't think I'd just say it shaped it. I think it really defines it, like that ability, that willingness, that deep desire to go in and really understand the why behind something. It leads to being able to come up with solutions that actually are fun to implement too. So
yeah.
Like 7 years ago on the podcast, I said, I stole your question, Jill. I believe you completely. Curiosity is your thing because it's tell me more is your favorite question.
This is just a quick aside, but a friend of mine says that sometimes you just have to act like a 2-year-old and keep saying why, until you get to the bottom of it.
I love that. And for me, I think of curiosity to me has helped so much because when something intrigues me, I tend to go down rabbit holes. And whether it was starting this podcast or Dave and I starting CUInsight, it was, what is this blogging thing? Then just asking the questions and looking at podcasts and saying, why are these people doing this? I like listening to them. And I think that just goes through with everything, is just the wanting to know a little bit more, and whether it's stuff that we already know about or not. So, and I find some people fascinating too, just not as many as Jill. So
you're a little more discerning. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I only have so much space. So
here's the difference is if I meet somebody and they're not fascinating on the surface, that intrigues me more because I'm like, ooh, how far do I have to dig to get to like that thing that's deeply interesting about you? You're like, next.
Somebody else is going to be fascinating. Awesome. Any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up, or something you'd like to leave with the listeners?
Well, I certainly didn't imagine when we started that we'd go from AI to gorillas to Bruce Springsteen and then back again. But I love the journey, and I love that you two are willing to ask those questions to kind of get all of our creative juices flowing. And I'll leave with this one parting thought. I think going to business school, the best class I took was one that I thought was just a little piece of fluff, and it was called creativity. Ooh. And it was awesome because it taught all kinds of tools for asking good questions, for doing exercises with teams about how can you creatively solve a problem. And so I think what that taught me is that it can be fun too, right? It doesn't have to be a grind. We can just, turn it into almost a playtime exercise where we imagine what's possible by getting really creative and asking good questions. Staying curious.
I think I would just leave it at this idea of there's a natural inclination to curiosity that some people hold, certainly. But even if you were somebody who maybe isn't as far on the spectrum of curiosity as like, say, I am, for example, it's a practice too. So it's not just a mindset, but it is actually that if we're talking about curiosity and it's just a concept that doesn't resonate with one of our listeners, but they are interested in seeing how they might, that desire there to just act like a 2-year-old, as Caroline said. So you can practice, you can cultivate curiosity, even if it's not naturally occurring, just through that willingness to ask a few more questions than you think are necessary.
And I'll just leave with the question that I stole from Jill. Tell me more. So as we wrap this up, think about where curiosity could expand your leadership perspective. What questions are you not asking that could make a difference?
Curiosity is a choice. It's one of the simplest ways to lead with openness and adaptability.
A big thank you to our friend Caroline for joining us today. We've appreciated you taking the time and having this conversation so much.
It's always so much fun.
Love it. We can't wait till the next time. And of course, to the Sheeter Group for supporting these conversations, and all of you for listening, because we wouldn't get to have this much fun doing what we do without you. Check out the show notes for links, resources, ways to stay in touch. And please don't forget to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. We're on them all.
We'll be back soon. But until then, be well, stay curious, and lead with heart.
Thank you all for listening.